Hey guys, tonight we're heading to the soft-lit streets of Paris. Not the postcard-perfect Paris, but one with mist clinging to the cobblestones, where a woman once stood beneath 10,000 tons of iron and said, "I do." You probably won't survive this, if you're allergic to public displays of affection between humans and national monuments. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through Paris as it dozes beneath the velvet curtain of night. The last crepe cart clicks shut with a sigh, and the scent of butter and powdered sugar lingers in the still air. Overhead, the moon slinks between chimneys, casting long shadows on aging limestone. A cat crosses your path like it owns the arrondissement, and it does. In this city, every window holds a secret, and every bench a story. But tonight, your path leads not to a tucked-away jazz bar or candlelit cafe, but to something far taller. Something with rivets. Something with legs. The Eiffel Tower rises ahead like a sleeping titan. You've seen it before, sure. Lit up in movies, wedding photos, and those motivational posters from the 90s with words like inspiration slapped beneath it. But you've never stood with it like this. In silence. In softness. Like a companion, not a landmark. You step closer. She hums faintly in the wind. For some, this would be a monument. For others, a backdrop. For Erica Labrie, it would one day be a spouse. Paris is no stranger to strange affections. This is, after all, the city that once debated whether snails could be an aphrodisiac and whether absinthe could make poets hallucinate their soul. So maybe it's not surprising that, in the quiet corners of its sprawling boulevards, a different kind of love took root. One with no kisses, no shared bank account, and no bickering over IKEA shelves. But before Erica, before the wedding dress and whispered vows at the foot of this iron empress, there was simply the tower itself. Let's pause and take her in. Designed by engineer Gustave Eiffel and unveiled in 1889 for the Exposition Universelle, the Eiffel Tower was meant to show the world that France could build something unapologetically modern. And very, very tall. At 300 meters, she was the tallest structure in the world for 4 whole decades. Historians note that many Parisians hated it at first. Writers, artists, and intellectuals called it an iron monstrosity, a lamp post with delusions of grandeur. Composer Charles Gounod allegedly refused to dine anywhere he could see it, and novelist Guy de Maupassant famously ate lunch inside the tower because, he claimed, it was the only spot in Paris where he didn't have to look at it. Eventually, like a well-worn piece of furniture you once despised and then found yourself inexplicably fond of, Parisians softened. Tourists arrived. Postcards were printed. Romance was projected onto its lattice legs until the structure itself became synonymous with the very idea of love. Of course, none of them meant marrying it. Yet here you are, standing beneath its archways, wind curling around your ankles, imagining what it feels like to reach out and touch something this old and this enduring. You place a hand on one of its cool iron legs, just as Erica once did. It doesn't move. It never does. And still, you feel seen. There's something deeply comforting about the objectum sexuality, or OS is a term that's been used to describe deep emotional, romantic, and often erotic attachments to inanimate objects. While psychologists still struggle to define whether it's a rare identity, a mental health phenomenon, or something else entirely, OS individuals often report vivid emotional connections with bridges, buildings, vehicles, or fences. Historians still argue whether this attraction is ancient in its roots or a peculiarly modern phenomenon shaped by loneliness, sensory sensitivity, or simply the human mind doing what it does best, finding patterns and feelings in the unexpected. You think back to that one kid in high school who named his saxophone and claimed it knew when he was sad. Or the woman on that documentary who swore her toaster understood her more than any man ever could. You might have rolled your eyes then. But here, now, the idea floats differently. Softer. Less absurd. After all, Isn't love often just attention, directed persistently? You take another step around the base of the Eiffel, your footsteps echoing like soft drumbeats on the stone. A breeze catches your collar. You imagine Erica doing the same walk, deliberate, reverent. Did she feel foolish? Or fearless? Did the tower shimmer for her more than for others? Or perhaps it simply stood, and that was enough. A horse-drawn carriage clops by in your imagination, even though the last one probably retired sometime before you were born. Still, Paris lets you believe in things like that. In Ghosts of Old Jazz, the smell of Gaulois cigarettes, and the whispered possibility that loving something, really loving it, doesn't need to make sense to anyone else. You lean against the cool iron and close your eyes. A soft clanging in the distance. Maybe a cafe chair being stacked. Maybe a memory being set down gently for the night. The city sighs. You do too. And somewhere beneath your hand, the Eiffel hums on. Unchanged. Unhurried. Unmoved. But not unloved. You keep walking, tracing the wide feet of the Eiffel Tower as they disappear into her long, lacy legs, beams overlapping like the spines of open books, crisscrossed and careful, each one bolted into place by hands long gone. The bolts themselves, over 2.5 million of them, were hand-placed, a quiet labor of late 19th century engineering you can almost feel beneath your fingertips. The iron gives off a faint warmth, not from the night, but from age. From memory. It's here, on one of these quiet nights, though not this exact one, that a woman named Erica Labrie would come alone, drawn like a magnet, unsure of what she was feeling at first. Erica wasn't always a tower romancer. She grew up in California, lived a relatively unremarkable life for many years, and plot twist, served in the military. The kind of backstory you don't expect from someone who would one day become a minor media storm for marrying a monument. She wasn't always the quiet, graceful figure you see in the wedding photos. In one interview, she said she was a deeply private person. Which makes sense. You don't fall in love with an object if you're desperate for applause. She was a champion fencer too. Yes, swordplay. There's something oddly poetic about that, one of the most intimate combat sports, where you learn to read breath and muscle twitches like Morse code. Where the goal is connection, precision, and restraint. Maybe fencing taught her something about proximity, how to exist closely without wounding, how to dance beside something powerful without demanding a change for you. Historians still debate whether Erica's attraction to the tower started as a fascination with structure or something more emotional. What is clear is that her feelings intensified when she traveled to Paris in 2004. As she would later explain, something clicked. Not just admiration, but longing. She started visiting the tower frequently, touching it gently, bringing it gifts. Red ribbons. Small tokens. Like someone wooing a shy, silent partner who just happens to be 10,000 tons of lattice iron. You pause and look up again. The tower really does change shape the closer you get. From a distance, it's tidy geometry, almost abstract. But up close, it becomes something else, intimate, mechanical, oddly intricate. Like looking into a clock, or the belly of a ship. So many parts, all held in agreement. 100 years of wind, pigeons, lightning, lovers. And then there was Erica, slipping between tourists, pressing her cheek against the metal, whispering to it, though she wouldn't tell you what she said. Something stayed between a couple. She named it La Tour Eiffel, not in some twee pet name way, but with reverence. As one might say my beloved, or my cathedral. She carried photographs of it. Slept with a miniature replica beside her bed. She once said, "I know this is the love of my life." And unlike so many declarations of love, this one didn't come with divorce papers 5 years later or arguments over thermostat settings. The tower, silent and still, kept standing. There's a softness in her story that gets missed when people try to joke about it. Tabloids splashed it across pages as bizarre or freakish. Morning shows made it a punchline. Erica rarely responded. But in one rare interview she said, "I don't expect people to understand. I just ask that they respect it." That line stays with you. You whisper it now, walking where she might have walked. I just ask that they respect it. Because how many people fall in love with something truly unshakable? The Eiffel Tower has survived 2 world wars. During the Nazi occupation of Paris, French resistance fighters cut the elevator cables so Hitler would have to climb the stairs if he wanted to reach the top. He never did. The tower outlived him. It outlived Maupassant, Gounod, and thousands of wide-eyed honeymooners who passed beneath it. And it would, quietly, embrace Erica. Maybe not in the way we think of affection. There were no arms. No heartbeat. No whispered goodnight. But love doesn't always follow the same blueprints. You sit now on one of the benches tucked under the tower's leg, the kind that creaks when you lean too far back. You imagine Erica sitting here, dressed in black, maybe holding something, one of her fencing medals, perhaps? Or a photograph of the tower from some forgotten angle, as if seeing it new again. Objectum sexuals often describe their love in terms of personality. They say the object has moods, quirks, responses. Erica once claimed she could sense when the tower was happy or sad, depending on the weather, the energy, the way it shimmered in moonlight. It's easy to scoff at that. But sit here long enough, and you begin to wonder, what if that's just how love feels when it isn't filtered through conversation? What if devotion can hum instead of speak? Historians, for all their tools and timelines, still can't quite pin down why certain people form deep emotional connections with objects. Some blame childhood trauma. Others suggest sensory sensitivity or spectrum-related wiring. Some write it off as delusion. But even among experts, no clear answer has emerged. Maybe it's a glitch in the human mind. Or maybe it's not a glitch at all. Maybe the real question is, why don't more people fall in love with things that last? You run your fingers along the cool edge of, and in your mind, Erica stands once more beneath this canopy of metal and moonlight. She looks up, not as a tourist, not as a curiosity, but as someone who's come home. You don't remember exactly when you started thinking of the Eiffel Tower as her. But by now, it feels natural. Not as a statue or a thing to pose near and forget, but as a presence. A tall, silent witness to millions of tiny, fleeting lives. Including Erica's. In 1889, when Gustave Eiffel unveiled the tower at the Exposition Universelle, it was hailed by some as a technological marvel, and by others as an eyesore. One critic called it a truly tragic street lamp. Another said it resembled an unfinished scaffold. Eiffel, however, didn't mind. He compared his tower to the Egyptian pyramids, stark, geometric, misunderstood at first, but eventually revered. Over time, Parisians came to see the tower less as an interruption to the skyline and more like a grand aunt who never leaves the balcony, strange at first, but somehow comforting. Especially at night, when her lights flicker on like a slow heartbeat. You can imagine Erica seeing her like that for the first time. Not from the top of a tourist bus, but slowly, walking, breathing, watching the iron shift in the daylight. People probably rushed by her, snapping quick selfies or searching for a better angle. But Erica would have stayed still, transfixed. Maybe she touched one of the pillars when no one was looking, like someone reaching out to confirm a dream. There's something quietly revolutionary about choosing your own beloved. Not because of their laugh or their charm or their cleverness over wine, but because they move something unspoken inside you. Erica chose the Eiffel Tower not as a political statement, not as art, and not for shock value, but because she felt seen. Or perhaps, safely unseen. That part's hard to articulate, the comfort of being overlooked. Objects, after all, don't judge. They don't ask questions or shift expectations. They don't forget your name or ask why you're being so quiet. In a world that constantly pulls you into awkward interactions, a silent, sturdy partner can feel like peace itself. And yet love, true love, even if it's unconventional, tends to make itself known. Erica didn't intend to become a symbol. But people noticed. One spring evening in 2007, she wore a red dress and a soft expression, and stood beneath the tower to say her vows. Yes, real vows. She called it a private ceremony, although it didn't stay private for long. The moment photos emerged, the press pounced. You walk now where she stood, on the eastern leg's edge near the base. A place of iron bones and pigeon coos and the faint metallic scent of rust meeting dew. It's oddly peaceful. Quiet enough to hear the river if you tilt your ear. Quiet enough for a wedding. She brought friends to the ceremony, others from the Objectum community, who stood by her not just out of support, but understanding. A woman who loved a carnival ride. Another who'd long adored a wooden fence. These weren't costumes or gimmicks. They were connections. The photos show Erica with her hand resting gently against the beam, like you might place your palm on a loved one's shoulder. Her eyes closed. Her forehead pressed to iron. She didn't kiss the tower. That would have felt forced, she said. Instead, she simply stayed. Present. Loving. Still. And yes, she brought a ribbon. A large red silk ribbon, which she wrapped around one of the beams like a sash. It trailed gently in the breeze like a whisper no one quite heard. People later asked if she received a certificate. No. There was no legal form involved, no signature by a government official. But she didn't need one. Marriage, she said in a soft interview years later, isn't always about law. It's about we throw that word around a lot, don't we? Commit to your goals. Commit to your partner. Commit to an exercise regimen. But commitment to something that cannot change, cannot respond, cannot even hold your hand. That's something else entirely. It wasn't all soft Parisian romance for Erica, though. The press was, in a word, brutal. Late-night hosts made jokes. Articles tried to dissect her like a lab specimen. Talk shows invited her on, only to poke and prod beneath a polite veneer. But Erica never flinched. She declined most appearances. When she did speak, it was carefully, with the kind of steady tone someone uses when they've explained themselves 100 times and still don't expect to be understood. She often said she didn't need people to agree, just to let her be. Historians still argue whether Erica's public ceremony marked the beginning of a new visibility for Objectum sexuality, or whether it was just a brief cultural curiosity. Some believe the Tower wedding empowered others to come forward. Others claim it set back serious conversation by encouraging mockery. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle, where most messy human things tend to rest. You think of Erica after the ceremony, walking home alone, maybe, as the sky turned that pale lavender only Paris seems to manage. What did she feel? Peace? Sadness? Relief? You imagine her pausing on the Pont d'Iéna, looking back at the tower, her partner, her love, her home. It would still be lit, its lights flickering like champagne bubbles. In that quiet moment, you wonder if she smiled. Not because she needed approval, but because she had found what so many search for, something, someone, in her way, that made her feel whole. The tower never laughed at her. Never looked away. And tonight, standing in the same shadow, either do you. You lean against the iron leg of the tower, and close your eyes for a moment. The metal is cold, grounding. You imagine it has always been this way, unyielding, not out of cruelty, but out of consistency. There's comfort in something that never budges. You remember Erica once describing the tower's beams as stronger than any person I've ever known. That line stayed with people. It wasn't just dramatic flair. She meant it. And maybe that says more about people than about the tower. Not everyone, after all, is built to withstand the weight of someone else's heart. In the years following her ceremony, Erica would return to the Eiffel Tower when she could. Living in the US made frequent visits tricky, but she held the tower in her life through photographs, documentaries, and conversations. At home, she surrounded herself with miniature replicas and a carefully maintained emotional space that kept her connection alive. People called them obsessions, but to her, they were continuity. They were reminders of love. You might call it unusual. But think about it. Don't you have that one mug, that old shirt, that weird piece of wall art you couldn't throw out even when it cracked? Objects hold stories. They become containers for emotion. We're always projecting feelings onto things. The difference is Erica didn't pretend it was metaphorical. Objectum sexuality, though often misunderstood or reduced to punchlines, is neither new nor isolated. As you stretch your legs and wander away from the bench, your mind meanders through history, throughout little pockets of affection where humans have fallen for more than just other humans. There's the woman in Germany who famously claimed to be married to the Berlin Wall. She spoke to it, touched it gently, even mourned when pieces of it were dismantled. Some thought she was eccentric. Others thought she was simply reacting to its disappearance the way anyone would grieve a lost partner. You wander farther back. Historians note instances of people in ancient Rome naming their favorite statues, dressing them in garlands, and speaking to them as confidants. It was rarely mocked. In fact, it was often seen as spiritual, a form of connection to the divine, or to beauty, or to permanence. In Greek mythology, Pygmalion fell in love with his own sculpture. The gods had to intervene and make her flesh, but the heart of the story wasn't magic. It was attachment to something ideal. Something that could never disappoint until it changed. There's a museum in Sweden where someone once sent weekly letters to a defunct 1960s Ferris wheel. And a woman in Tokyo, known only through rumor and online forums, who wrote poems to a bridge for nearly 20 years. The bridge is now gone. The poems remain. So perhaps Erica wasn't so strange after all. Maybe she was simply louder about a very quiet part of the human soul. Historians still argue whether objectum sexuality is a phenomenon shaped by modern alienation, born from technology, loneliness, and the abstraction of intimacy, or whether it's simply a new name for an old longing. The kind of longing that can't always fit inside a human-shaped box. As you walk, you pass beneath the first platform of the Eiffel Tower. The elevator, that famously cut cable during World War II, hums somewhere above. It's hard to believe anyone could call this structure ugly now. It shimmers. Not loudly. Not garishly. But with grace. You glance up and think of all the people who've stood here, camera in hand, trying to capture its angles. Its height. Its everything. Yet Erica never needed a camera to love it. She didn't just see the tower. She felt it. As if its shadow reached across an ocean and rested in her living room. And love like that, it rearranges you. You remember her saying once that it wasn't about attraction in a typical way. Not about desire, at least not in the physical sense. It was about energy. Compatibility. Knowing. It's like being on the same frequency as someone, or something, and finding silence easier in their presence than words are anywhere else. It's not so foreign, is it? Think of the people who talk to their cars when they're nervous. Or those who stroke the spine of a beloved book like it's a shoulder. We whisper to our computers when they lag, touch the TV screen during emotional scenes, tap picture frames before leaving the house. We leave parts of ourselves in objects all the time. Maybe Erica just saw the truth in that, and walked toward it without flinching. Of course, the world loves a flinch. Media interviews often zeroed in on the absurd. But how do you know? They'd ask, as if the mechanics were the point. Erica rarely gave them what they wanted. She redirected. She reminded them that intimacy isn't always visible. That connection doesn't need witnesses. You pause by one of the tower's interior stairwells, listening to the distant clink of someone far above climbing higher. A tourist, maybe? Or someone chasing a better view. Erica never needed the top. Her connection wasn't about vistas or photographs. It was about foundation. About presence. One of her friends once said, Erica doesn't need to own the tower to feel married to it. And really, how many human marriages can say the same? The tower stands beneath your hand now, as steady as ever. It doesn't speak. It doesn't move. But it doesn't vanish either. You could stand here for 1,000 hours and it wouldn't leave. You'd age. You'd shift. But the tower, she would stay. That's love too, isn't it? The kind that doesn't perform. Doesn't rush. Just remains. In your pocket, there's a metro ticket, creased at the corners. You think of how many objects you'll forget from this trip, and perhaps, like Erica, you begin to wonder. What if stillness is not emptiness? What if silence is not absence? What if love, in its strangest, most misunderstood form, is simply finding something that listens, in its own way? You stay by the tower longer than you planned. Not because you're waiting for something to happen, but because it already is. The moment just continues. The breeze tugs gently at your sleeves. Somewhere nearby, a scooter coughs to life and then fades into the city's quiet churn. The Eiffel Tower doesn't flinch. You swear it almost settles, like a cat that's just curled into a better shape. It's easy to imagine Erica returning to this spot again and again, each visit a small pilgrimage. Sometimes bringing a ribbon. Sometimes just her breath and thoughts. And always her affection. Quiet, unshaken, unsought. People often asked why. Why the Eiffel Tower? Why not a person? As if love must be justified, categorized, or aligned with some social template. Erica's answer was usually calm. Polite, even. It's not about why, she once said. It just is. That unsettled people. It just is. They wanted a cause. A root. A symptom. A trauma. But what if the deepest things, grief, beauty, devotion, don't come with bullet-point explanations? You continue around the base of the tower, feet echoing softly on the worn paths. The iron beams above hold stories you'll never hear. Screws turned by hands in 1887. Rainfall from every season. Pigeons that witness declarations of love, arguments, even quiet proposals never spoken aloud. And then there's Erica's first real touch. It happened during one of her early visits. She reached out and laid her hand flat against the lower beam. She described it later not as electric or thrilling, but as peaceful. Like a full-body exhale. Her shoulders dropped. Her thoughts stopped racing. It was, she said, the first time I ever felt safe. That's a powerful word, safe. How many people chase it for a lifetime? And here it was, hiding in steel. Historians still debate whether Erica's feelings were formed from neurological patterning or something more symbolic. Was it about the tower itself, or about what it represented, strength, stillness, endurance? Was it about control? Or was it the inverse, a surrender to something larger? Some scholars think objectum sexuality emerges from trauma, particularly in people who have experienced emotional neglect. The idea is that objects don't reject you. They don't criticize. They don't change their moods mid-conversation. But others argue it's not trauma-based at all. It's just another form of orientation, like any other. One researcher even suggested that perhaps humans overestimate the need for reciprocation in love. That line makes you pause. Reciprocation is nice, sure. But how many people love someone or something without ever being noticed in return? The musician obsessed with a forgotten composer. The child who sleeps with a worn-out teddy bear until college. The widow who still says goodnight to the empty side of the bed. Is it less real because it's one-sided? Erica didn't think so. She said she could feel the tower respond. Not with words or movement, of course, but through energy, sensation, warmth on her skin, a kind of presence. And while science has never confirmed such a thing, either has it definitively denied it. The language of connection doesn't always pass through a microscope. You picture Erica during one of those early visits. Maybe it's evening. Maybe the tower is lit, that golden glow that Paris has some she likely knew people would never understand. And still, she came. Again and again. Because love is not democratic. It doesn't require votes of approval. It moves quietly, like water through stone, carving space for itself where no one else thought to look. You stop and look up. From this angle, the tower seems impossibly large, and yet, familiar. Like a grandmother's quilt that's just been stretched to the sky. Every bolt, every seam, every shadow feels intentional. Not like a monument, but like a partner. One of Erica's more controversial statements was her belief that objects have souls. Not all objects. Not every table or fence post. But some. She said you could feel it when an object had a life beyond its function. Some laughed. Others grew uncomfortable. But many OS individuals report something similar. A gut sense of this one is different. She called it animacy. not in the literal sense of movement or speech, but something internal. A spiritual heartbeat. And for her, the Eiffel Tower had the strongest pulse she'd ever felt. Of course, belief in animacy is older than Erica, and older than psychology. Ancient animist traditions across the globe teach that objects, rivers, trees, and tools contain spirits. That everything carries a presence. In many cultures, that belief is sacred, not pathology. It's only recently, in industrialized societies, that talking to your houseplants is considered quirky instead of holy. You smile a little. Maybe we've lost something in all our progress. A gust of wind moves through the legs of the tower, rattling a small sign nearby. It flaps and squeaks before settling again. The metal groans faintly. Whether from wind, wear, or memory, you can't be sure. Somewhere in your chest, something softens. There's a curious dignity in Erica's story. Not just for her feelings, but for her refusal to reshape them for other people. She could have hidden. Could have framed her connection as performance art, or as a metaphor. But she didn't. She called it what it was, a relationship. And not just any relationship. A marriage. That word shook people. Marriage implies commitment. Vows. Partnership. Foreverness. And yet Erica used it boldly. Not to be provocative, but to be precise. For her, the tower was not a symbol of love. It was love. And perhaps, in its strange, towering way, the tower agreed. You wander beneath one of the arches, pausing where the metal legs meet in a triangle of shadow. This spot, shaped almost like a chapel, might be your favorite. It feels quiet even when tourists pass nearby. Like the tower is drawing breath, and you're just inside its chest. You imagine Erica discovering this same corner years ago, during one of her early visits. Her footsteps soft on the pavement, her fingers skimming the cool surface of a beam, careful not to disturb the stillness too much. It was here, perhaps, that her feelings first shifted from curiosity to something deeper. In interviews, Erica talked about the aura of the tower. Not magic, exactly, but an emotional presence. She believed it had consciousness. Not like a human mind, but something subtler. You didn't talk to the tower the way you talk to a person. You listened. You waited. You let your body feel. That might sound strange, unless you've ever stood in a forest so quiet it felt like the trees were breathing. Or stepped inside a cathedral and felt tears rise for no reason you could name. Certain places, certain forms, they hold something. Weight, spirit, memory. And sometimes, love. Erica wasn't alone in this. Many objectum individuals describe similar feelings, not just of attraction, but of relationship. Real, consistent, and specific. One woman in Sweden fell in love with a church organ. She described its deep notes. Historians still argue whether objectum sexuality is a distinct orientation, like being gay or straight, or whether it sits somewhere along a spectrum of neurodiversity. Some see links to autism, especially among those who describe intense sensory connections with certain textures or materials. Others reject any pathologizing entirely. We don't need to be fixed, one objectum individual wrote. We need to be heard. You sit now at the base of the tower and run your hand over the nearest support. It's not smooth, there are ridges, tiny scratches, traces of time. There's even a bolt with a little rust gathering at the edges, like an aged spot on skin. And somehow, it makes her more beautiful. Erica often said she didn't love the Eiffel Tower in spite of its imperfections, but because of them. It had lived. It had endured. It had survived war, protest, tourism, lightning strikes, and the occasional pigeon rebellion. It had stood through it all. She related to that. Her past wasn't always gentle. Erica had spoken carefully, briefly, about experiences in her youth that made human connection difficult. She never gave details. But she did say, "The tower never lied to me. It never changed its story." That line, simple as it is, cuts through you. Because so many human relationships do change shape over time. What starts tender becomes sharp. Promises unravel. People leave. Sometimes they vanish without explanation. But the tower? The tower remains. It doesn't withdraw affection. Doesn't speak in riddles. Doesn't forget your name when things get hard. There's a comfort in constancy that only the lonely truly appreciate. You wonder what Erica's first full day married to the tower felt like. Did she wake with a new kind of quiet inside her? Did she look at her miniature tower replica at home and see a spouse, not just an object? Did the world outside, busy and judgmental, grow blurrier now that she had this strange, steady joy? She wasn't asking for the world's approval. She wasn't even asking for comprehension. She just wanted space to love. And love, as we know, is rarely tidy. The public, however, prefers tidiness. After news of her ceremony spread, Erica became the face of objectum sexuality. Not by choice, really. She was one of the few who spoke openly. Her story traveled the globe, magazines, morning shows, social media memes. Some people laughed. Some were fascinated. But very few simply listened. That's the odd thing about visibility. It doesn't always feel like recognition. Sometimes it's just exposure. And for someone as private as Erica, that kind of spotlight had to sting. She retreated after a while. Declined interviews. Closed off parts of her life that had once been public. But she didn't recant. Didn't shift her story to make it easier for others to digest. The tower was still her wife. Her partner. Her home. You admire that kind of steadiness. Because when the world demands explanation and you offer only honesty, it's easy to be misunderstood. You walk along the outer path, tracing your fingertips across the iron fence that now circles the tower's base. It wasn't always here, added in recent years for safety and crowd control. Erica might not have liked it. She always preferred closeness. Direct contact. She wanted to feel the tower, not just look at it. That makes sense. We are, after all, a tactile species. We touch to remember. We hold to anchor ourselves. You think of all the times you've run your hand along something without thinking. 1,000 people touch the Eiffel Tower each day. But for Erica, each gesture was intentional. Meaningful. Every caress and ribbon tied to a beam was a sentence, a conversation, a whisper. You can almost hear it now. Not in words, but in presence. The tower creaks softly above you. Somewhere up there, a late crew member moves through the metal walkways, doing maintenance by flashlight. The structure groans, settling, aging, remembering. And you sit below, remembering with it. The sky above Paris begins to fade from black to a soft velvet gray, and you can feel the city shifting. Streetlights blink off, pigeons stretch their necks and coo like fussy old men waking up too early, and bakeries begin to hum to life behind glass storefronts. But down here, in the hush beneath the Eiffel Tower, you remain still. You think again about Erica, what it must have felt like, not just to visit the tower, but to return to it. To know that it would be there, unflinching, every time. Most lovers change. Most relationships evolve. But with the tower, the continuity was the point. It stayed exactly the same. That was part of the love story. You wonder, does it get boring, loving something that doesn't grow or talk or change? For Erica, the answer seemed to be no. And maybe that's because real connection isn't always about progress. Sometimes it's about stillness. The ability to just be with something, or someone, without needing it to perform. There's a quiet wisdom in that. A gentle resistance to the modern obsession with next and more. Erica once said that the tower offered her a sense of stability she'd never found elsewhere. Not even with other people in the OS community, though she respected and cared for many of them. The tower, she said, had a spirit of dignity. And being near it made her feel dignified too. It didn't make her feel broken. It made her feel seen. That surprises people often. They expect a story like Erica's to be born from lack of connection, of companionship, of something essential. But what if, instead, it was born from presence? From noticing what others missed? Historians still argue whether Erica's feelings reflect a broader cultural condition, loneliness in the digital age, attachment in a hyper-disposable society, or something deeply personal and self-contained. Some psychologists point to early developmental attachment patterns, others to neurodivergent sensory profiles. But again, the theories never quite touch the center. And Erica? She rarely engaged with the theories at all. She didn't need an explanation. Her life wasn't a case study, it was a relationship. And her partner just happened to be 300 meters tall and made of puddled iron. You trail your fingers along a smaller structural beam, your steps echoing faintly. The tower doesn't respond, but it doesn't retreat either. You're reminded of a phrase Erica once used, intimacy without demand. She wasn't trying to get anything from the tower. She didn't want it to bend toward her, or change to suit her moods. She just wanted to be near it. To feel anchored. It's a rare kind of love, you realize, one with no expectation of reciprocity. Most human relationships hinge on some kind of return, affection, conversation, growth. But Erica's didn't. And that's perhaps what made it feel so radical to others. We're taught that love must do something. Her love simply was. You keep walking, the sky now tinged with the faintest brush of rose. Paris begins to breathe again. A cyclist swerves past, headphones in, oblivious to your quiet reverie. A jogger stops to stretch against the railing nearby. You feel the shift, the world waking, but you're still tucked in that strange midnight pocket between day and dream. Maybe Erica liked mornings here, too. You passed a little souvenir stand, still shuttered, their wares slumbering behind grates. Erica owned dozens of Eiffel Tower miniatures, some gifted by friends, some collected during her own travels. To most, they're trinkets. To her, they were connections, small reminders of a much larger bond. Like wedding photos. Or a locket. Just a way to hold something close when it's far. Her home in the US was filled with them. She spoke of it once in an interview, not with pride exactly, but with warmth. She described the way light hit a particular shelf at noon and made one silver tower sparkle just like the real one does at dusk. She called it a comfort. A presence. Like her spouse was visiting, just for a moment. You pause now at a spot near the tower's southeast foot where Erica was once photographed, alone, in the golden hour light. She's standing close to the beam, one hand resting lightly against it, the other holding a single ribbon. Her expression isn't grand or theatrical. It's simple. Soft. She's looking up, but not to the top. Just upward. As if listening. And maybe she was. Many OS individuals talk about communication, not in speech, but in sense. They describe warmth, vibration, shifts in mood. Not everyone understands that, but then again, not everyone needs to. Some things are real because they're felt, not because they're explained. You sit down again, this time on a short ledge by the tower's base, and imagine what a typical day might have been like for Erica in Paris. Wake up, maybe in a tiny rented room with a view of a corner of the tower. Eat something small, something French, probably while staring at a photo of her partner. Then head out, winding through narrow streets, each step bringing her closer to that looming silhouette of love. She probably took her time. No need to rush toward the thing that never leaves. When she arrived, she might have paused for a long while. Just looking. Just feeling. Then she would approach, maybe place a ribbon on a bolt, maybe bring a small note or token. Not to be seen. Not to impress. Just to give. To offer something back to what had given her so much. And then she'd sit. Maybe like you're sitting now. Listening to the tower breathe in wind and exhale rust. Watching the light change along its beams. Letting the city blur around the edges as her focus sharpened on one still point. That kind of presence is rare. And precious. And not easily understood in a world that prefers noise. You look up once more. And there she is. Not Erica, though you imagine her here, somewhere in the quiet corners of your mind, but the tower herself. La Dame de Fer. The Iron Lady. Not smiling, not frowning. Just standing. Holding you in the hush of morning. Maybe this is how Erica felt, over and over again. Safe. Small. Seen. The sun is climbing now, slow and buttery, spilling light over the rooftops like it's unrolling a golden rug across Paris. The tower shifts in tone, not in form, its deep gray hue becoming copper, then bronze, then that soft, toasted gold that seems to glow from within. You've stayed here longer than expected. But time, in this strange bubble of rust and affection, seems less important. You try to imagine Erica's first time touching the tower after the wedding. Did she hesitate? Did she feel different? Or did the moment pass with quiet simplicity, as so many real commitments do, not with fanfare, but with presence? There's something striking about the way Erica described that ceremony. Not just the symbolic weight of it, but the gentleness. She didn't use grand words. She didn't say forever or destiny. Instead, she spoke about companionship. The way the tower made her feel calm. Supported. Anchored. Anchored. You keep coming back to that. You think of the millions who flock to the tower each year, snapping photos, posting reels, scribbling postcards. And yet none of them, perhaps no one on earth, has spent time with the tower in the way Erica did. She wasn't visiting it. She was with it. People often think of love as noise, flowers, songs, messages, confessions. But Erica's love wasn't about noise. It was about notice. About stillness. Being aware, in a world that constantly rushes past, of something that does not run. She once said, "When I'm with the tower, I'm not waiting for anything. I already have it." That unsettled some. Love, especially in Western narratives, is so often framed as a pursuit. Chase the beloved, win them, keep them. But Erica wasn't chasing. She had arrived. Her love didn't ask for more. Historians still argue whether this story, Erica's relationship with the tower, is a tale of romance, eccentricity, or something else entirely. Some frame it as a metaphor for alienation in the modern city. Others see it as an example of intense psychological projection. But the arguments never quite settle. Perhaps because Erica refused to be a theory. She simply lived her truth. And truth, it turns out, can be oddly quiet. You remember reading about how she would sometimes carry small bolts in her pocket, not from the Eiffel Tower, of course, but from other metal structures she felt attached to. She called them companions. Little pieces of the world that reminded her she was not alone. It's easy to mock that, until you realize how many of us do the same. The friend who keeps a smooth river stone in her jacket pocket. The grandmother who clutches her late husband's wristwatch like it still ticks. The child who brings a favorite spoon to every meal, convinced it makes the food taste better. We don't just touch things. We tether to them. Erica's fencing medals still sat beside her tower replicas, even after she retired. A part of her that once chased victory, now resting beside the part that chose stillness. That contrast isn't lost on you. Fencing, with its quick footwork, flashing blades, constant strategy. And the Eiffel Tower, which never moves. From speed to stillness. From tension to calm. Maybe her life wasn't a break from the norm. Maybe it was a return. You glance around. A few more tourists are beginning to arrive, carrying cameras and coffee. But the space beneath the tower still holds a hush. There's something sacred here, if you're quiet enough to feel it. You wonder how Erica handled the questions that inevitably came after the media storm. Not just from reporters, but from friends, coworkers, strangers. Do you really love it? Do you think it loves you back? Are you okay? She answered with more grace than many would manage. She said love doesn't have to be mirrored to be real. That being seen doesn't always look the way people expect. That she didn't need the tower to whisper her name to know it mattered. There's bravery in that. Because it takes courage to love without confirmation. To care without reward. To stand next to something enormous and silent, and believe it holds space for you too. You close your eyes again. You picture Erica not just as a woman in love, but as a kind of emotional cartographer, mapping a new way of being, even if no one else ever followed that same trail. And still, some did. Erica's story, though unusual, brought attention to others like her. Quietly, online communities grew. People shared stories of their deep affection for objects, bridges, musical instruments, staircases. Some formed support groups. Others simply felt less alone. And Erica? She became a kind of lighthouse. A symbol not of eccentricity, but of permission. Permission to love quietly. Permission to feel deeply. Permission to exist outside the blueprint. Historians still argue whether the public response to Erica's marriage did more harm or good. Whether it opened a door for discussion, or painted a target. But even if she wasn't seeking it, Erica changed the conversation. She turned a beam of attention towards something most people didn't know existed. And perhaps, changed it just by standing still, just like her tower. You stand now slowly, brushing off your legs. The light is stronger. You can see your reflection faintly in a nearby panel of glass, eyes softer, breath slower. Being here changes you too a little. As you walk once more around the tower's base, you think about how love, real, persistent love, is never wasted. Even if it's misunderstood. Even if it's mocked. Because love is its own reward. Not the kind with diamond rings or romantic comedies, but the kind you feel in your bones. The kind you carry with you. The kind that looks up at a quiet iron giant and feels whole. You cross to the far side of the tower, where the light is gentler and the crowds still haven't thickened. This side feels more secret. It faces away from the Seine, away from the postcard angles and the selfie sticks. It's a little quieter here, as if the tower is turning her head, letting you see her unguarded profile. Erica likely had her favorite spot too. A certain leg. A beam with a particular notch or texture. You imagine her finding that place early on and returning to it, over and over. The same way you might favor one side of the bed, or one mug for coffee, or one familiar bench in a park. Routines like that aren't just about comfort. They're about trust. About knowing something will be the same today as it was yesterday. In one of her rare public reflections, Erica said, "It's not about the Eiffel Tower being beautiful. It's about how she makes me feel." She didn't need the tower to be impressive, or flashy, or even understood by others. She loved the quiet strength. The unchanging loyalty. The sense of presence. You run your hand along the edge of a support beam and feel the texture, slightly uneven, cold, solid. Iron always has a kind of honesty to it. It doesn't soften like wood. It doesn't shatter like glass. It simply stays. It's easy to romanticize Erica's story now. But she lived through more than whispers and wonder. There was mockery, too. Headlines that called her the woman who wedded metal. Commentators chuckling as if she were a Saturday night punchline. Even well-meaning interviewers often failed to take her seriously. But she never lashed out. Never tried to reframe her love as performance art, or mental illness to appease the critics. She kept it simple. "I love her," she said, and let the rest fall away. Historians still debate whether Erica's quiet confidence challenged society's definitions of intimacy, or if it was simply too far outside the norm to shift anything at all. But there's no denying the subtle ripple her story left. A reminder that affection doesn't always have to follow the traditional path to be valid. You take a seat on the edge of a stone planter, one of those accidental resting spots designed more for symmetry than comfort. But in the cool shade, it's perfect. You imagine Erica sitting nearby, legs crossed, watching the tower shimmer in the late light. Maybe she would have written in a notebook. Or simply sat in silence, listening to the tower creak and groan as the wind swept through her limbs. Erica believed the tower made music. Not literal, of course, but a kind of structural harmony. Each beam and bolt vibrating with age and memory. A private orchestra for those who listened closely. It's not a wild idea. After all, buildings settle. Structures move. The Eiffel Tower grows by up to 6 inches in summer heat and shrinks again in the cold. Engineers have measured it. But Erica felt it. She described visiting during the summer as being embraced, and in winter as a quiet holding. That level of attunement sounds poetic until you realize it's probably how we all experience our most important relationships. You notice your partner's size, the tiny shift in their posture, the way they hold their coffee differently when they're sad. Erica just happened to direct that attention toward a monument instead of a person. That doesn't make it less real. In fact, it might make it more profound. You watch as a young couple walks past. They're giggling, trying to take a photo, but the angle's wrong. One of them leans too far and almost topples over the other. They laugh. The tower looms behind them, utterly unaffected. Unchanging. To them, it's a backdrop. To Erica, it was breath. You wonder how often people have brushed against the tower, touched her, leaned their foreheads against her beams, never knowing she had already been claimed in someone's heart. There's something oddly lovely about that. To belong to one, quietly, while still being touched by many. To be loved in a way that doesn't ask for exclusivity, only authenticity. You imagine Erica watching scenes like this play out. Not with jealousy, but with calm. The tower was public, yes, but her connection was private. Deep. Unmistakable. In a world that clamors to be seen, Erica never needed anyone to look at her. She only needed to look at the tower. One journalist once asked her if she ever wished the tower could respond. Erica paused and said she does. Just not in your language. That line has stayed with you. Because how many of us speak love in mismatched languages? How many of us wait for signs and gestures, for actions that match our hopes? Erica didn't wait. She listened differently. And in doing so, found something most never do, a sense of complete connection, free from demand. You rise and stretch. The tower groans again, perhaps from the warming air, perhaps from memory. Nearby, a bird lands on the beam you just touched. It pecks once, shakes its feathers, and flies off. You smile. Nothing spectacular. Just a quiet moment. One Erica might have cherished. You picture her walking here at dusk. Not in her red wedding dress, just in jeans and a windbreaker, with sneakers that scuffed faintly on the stones. She would touch the tower lightly with her fingertips, close her eyes, breathe deep. Not as a ritual. Not as a performance. Just as a hello. A shared silence. That's the kind of intimacy few understand, but many crave. No demands. No explanations. Just the kind of nearness that steadies your pulse and reminds you that you are, somehow, home. And maybe that's the truest kind of love. The sun has crept higher now, and the Eiffel Tower's shadow stretches across the plaza like a great, sleeping animal. You walk alongside it, tracing the cool edges with your gaze, imagining what it must have felt like for Erica on the day she married it. Yes, married. In 2007, beneath this very structure, Erica Labrie, by then calling herself Erica Eiffel, held a commitment ceremony. No legal paperwork, no officiant sanctioned by the French government, and certainly no wedding cake shaped like a transmission tower. Just her, a few friends, and a ribbon tied lovingly around one of the tower's legs. She wore a black dress with red accents, subtle but significant. The red matched the ribbon, a symbol of connection, she said. It trailed in the breeze like a delicate thread between her and her bride. You sit near the spot where the ribbon might have fluttered, trying to picture the moment. A tourist might have walked past without noticing anything unusual, a woman resting her hand on a structure, perhaps whispering to it. But for Erica, it was a vow. A promise. The culmination of years of quiet devotion. The ceremony was not grand or elaborate. There was no orchestra, no clinking glasses, no choreographed dances. But it had everything a marriage needs: intent, reverence, and love. Her friends in attendance were largely from the OS, objectum sexuality, community, people who understood her bond without needing it to be translated. They brought small offerings too: silk scarves, pressed flowers, a folded paper crane. Each item lay gently near the base, forming a private altar of affection. Erica read her vows aloud. She spoke softly, but with clarity, describing the comfort the tower gave her, the strength it symbolized, the way it had shaped her life. She thanked it for its patience, for its presence, for being something she could always count on. And then she pressed her cheek to the metal. No kiss. Just contact. Not everyone understood. In fact, most people didn't. Photos from the ceremony eventually made their way online. The reaction was as you'd expect: snarky headlines, talk show monologues, skeptical op-eds. But Erica didn't flinch. She never tried to win them over. People don't have to understand my relationship, she said. They just have to respect that it's mine. There's something incredibly dignified in that. You think about all the times people bend themselves into awkward shapes just to explain who they are, to earn a little compassion. But Erica stood steady, like the tower itself. No bending. No apologies. Historians still debate whether the event was a form of protest against the limits of conventional love, or the social rules that bind it. But Erica never framed it that way. She didn't call it activism. She called it affection. And that distinction matters. Because activism shouts. Affection whispers. You walk slowly now, passing the tower's west leg. The area is busier than before, footsteps multiplying, voices rising. But you stay inside your quiet cocoon, thinking about what it means to marry something that cannot say your name, cannot walk beside you, cannot meet you halfway, and choosing to do it anyway. You remember the small detail from that day. Erica carried a framed photo of the tower with her during the ceremony. Not for documentation, but for grounding. She said holding it helped her stay present, helped her keep calm. Like a talisman. Like holding the hand of someone who couldn't reach back. That kind of love, so patient, so self-sustaining, it demands a stillness few can manage. Later, when asked if she believed the tower knew about the wedding, Erica smiled gently and said, of course. She was there. To the outside world, that may sound fanciful, even delusional. But to Erica, and to many in the objectum community, emotional resonance doesn't require reciprocation in the traditional sense. Presence is its own response. You lean against the railing now, watching a few children play near a puddle. One of them jumps, splashing water over her brother's shoes. He shouts, but she just laughs and runs. Life spins on around you. And yet the tower doesn't shift. It never has. Erica once said that being with the tower gave her a sense of time that was not stressful or linear, but layered. She imagined all the visitors who'd passed through this plaza over the years. The people who had proposed here, cried here, broken up here. The tower remembered them all. It's not such a strange idea. We speak of well-loved books, of worn furniture holding memories, of homes that feel lived in. Maybe Erica just extended that thinking a little further. Maybe the tower, touched by millions of hands, has become a vessel of accumulated feeling. Not just steel and bolts, but echo. She didn't need proof. She just needed to feel it. And that's perhaps what made the wedding so powerful, its total refusal to perform. It wasn't for the cameras, or for validation. It was, in every sense, a private moment carried out in public. You wonder if anyone stumbled upon it by accident. A passerby heading to dinner, pausing at the strange sight of a woman pressing her forehead against iron with her eyes closed. And if they lingered, just long enough, maybe they caught the whisper of something sacred. Love is like that, sometimes. Not a grand gesture, but a quiet insistence. Erica's ceremony ended not with applause, but with silence. The tower stood. She bowed her head. Her friends gathered close, some wiping away quiet tears. And then, they walked away. Just like that. No parade. No honeymoon. But something had shifted. Erica had made her choice. And from that moment forward, the tower was no longer just a structure. It was her partner. You stay near the railing for a while, letting the image of Erica's quiet ceremony settle into your mind like dust into sunlight. A ribbon, a vow, a whispered promise to an iron companion. No church bells, no champagne flutes, just devotion, wrapped in rust and silence. And Erica, while one of the most visible, was far from alone. You walk now toward the edge of the plaza, where the trees create a dappled light across the path. Here, among the filtered shadows, your thoughts drift further, beyond Paris, beyond France. Because love like Erica's doesn't belong to just one city. Or one woman. It's more widespread than most realize. Across the world, people have found themselves drawn to objects, not in passing, not as novelty, but with enduring emotional bonds. A woman in San Diego publicly declared her affection for a segment of the Berlin Wall. She traveled across the ocean to touch it and described the moment as finally meeting my soulmate. Another woman, in Sweden, married a fairground ride named 1001 Nax. Her story quietly circled the internet, framed with the usual incredulous headlines. And yet there she was, smiling, serene, holding a framed photo of the structure like anyone would a beloved partner. In Japan, a man made headlines for marrying a holographic character, technically not an object, but not a person either. A different kind of non-traditional relationship, still driven by attention, care, consistency. It's easy to write off these stories as quirks of an increasingly digital world. But when you pause and listen closely, they begin to sound more like small poems about longing. About finding connection in a world that offers too little. Historians still debate whether such relationships are best understood as psychological phenomena, cultural symptoms, or sincere emotional orientations. Some researchers tie them to a growing sense of social isolation, pointing to shrinking friend groups, virtual interactions, and a rising discomfort with interpersonal vulnerability. Others see them as legitimate expressions of neurodiversity. But the academic framing never quite captures the texture of the stories themselves. You think of Erica again, standing beside the tower. She never tried to explain her feelings with science or sociology. She simply spoke from the heart. She's steady. She listens. She doesn't judge. That simplicity unsettles people. We're taught. One OS individual wrote online, "When I'm with my object, I feel safe." That's more than I can say for most of my human relationships. You let that line settle for a moment. Then you glance toward the tower again. It hasn't moved. Of course it hasn't. And yet in the shifting light, it feels different, warmer somehow. Less like a monument, more like a listener. A quiet companion, holding space without condition. Erica's experience isn't just about affection. It's about belonging. She found in the tower something many people spend a lifetime searching for, a sense of home. And home, as it turns out, doesn't always have a front door or a welcome mat. Sometimes, it rises above a city skyline and waits without expectation. You stroll now past a cluster of visitors taking photos, speaking in languages you can't quite catch. Laughter bubbles up, cameras click, a toddler drops a biscuit and shrieks. Life is spinning again, and the tower, as always, is the still point in the chaos. Erica understood that. She saw something in the tower most of us overlook, not just scale or engineering, but a kind of soul. And she responded with something rare, undemanding attention. It's easy to scoff at that kind of love. Easy to dismiss what doesn't fit a mold. But easy doesn't mean right. And perhaps Erica, and others like her, are simply wired to connect through resonance instead of dialogue. Some might argue that these relationships are lonely by nature. But the OS community often counters this assumption. Many objectum sexuals report deep contentment, especially when their bond is respected. They speak of stability, of understanding, of freedom from the emotional whiplash that can come with human partners. One woman in Germany described her relationship with a bridge as the first time I didn't feel afraid to be myself. That sentence rings in your ears as you watch the tower's shadow shift once again across the stone. You think about how many of us tailor ourselves in relationships, soften our edges, swallow our preferences, try to be more acceptable, more palatable. But Erica didn't tailor herself. Not to fit a person, not to fit a narrative. She simply chose, and stood by her choice. That's courage in its quietest form. There's a soft rebellion in her story, not loud, not attention-seeking, but firm. She dared to say, "This is enough. This love, however unconventional, is complete." And in doing so, she gave others permission. Since her story became public, forums and support groups have grown. People who once felt alone now write to each other about their bonds, with buildings, vehicles, instruments, even chairs. They share photos, anniversaries, vows. And though the world may never fully understand, within those circles, they find kinship. Erica, without ever intending to, became a kind of guide. Not a leader, not a spokesperson, but a touchstone. Not unlike the tower itself. You walk a little further, finding another bench, this one tucked under a tree where leaves filter the sun in golden green waves. You sit and let your shoulders relax. The Eiffel Tower towers above you, not speaking, not shifting, but undeniably present. And you understand, in some small, surprising way, what Erica might have meant. Because for just this moment, the noise of the world recedes. And the presence of something steady, unblinking, and endlessly patient wraps around you like a soft, invisible shawl. You stay seated on the bench beneath the tree, breathing in the scent of morning, warm stone, distant croissants, the faint electric tang of iron baking in sunlight. The Eiffel Tower looms above, familiar and unbothered, and for a moment, you forget it was ever anything but a living companion. It's strange how quickly something shifts once you've been invited to see it differently. Before, the tower might have been just a landmark to you, magnificent, yes, but inert. A structure for postcards and proposals. Now, with Erica's story settled gently behind your eyes, it feels like more. A being. A partner. A quiet, listening body of iron. You remember how Erica once described being near the tower as feeling held without being touched. It's a phrase that sounds poetic, even mystical, until you think about the architecture itself. The way it wraps around the sky. The way its legs arch wide like open arms. The way you can stand inside it, not above or beneath, but within. Love is rarely symmetrical. That's one of its cruelest, kindest truths. We pour into others, into places, memories, songs, never knowing whether the return will match the offering. But perhaps that's not the point. Perhaps love's truest form is that which continues anyway. Erica continued. Long after the media attention faded. Long after the shock value wore off and the internet moved on to its next novelty. She kept loving the tower. Quietly. Faithfully. At home, in the US, she kept replicas close. Photos, models, a curved fragment of iron from a different structure, but similar enough to evoke the feeling. She'd sit near them. Sleep beside them. In one interview she said, "When I hold them, I feel less far away." She was never trying to replace the real tower. She knew nothing could. But objects, to her, weren't just reminders. They were bridges, extensions of presence, not substitutes. Historians still argue whether architecture has emotional resonance simply because of how it affects space and light, or whether something deeper happens when we spend enough time with a structure. Some say it's about imprinting, the way our bodies, our energy, our stories linger where we've lived them. Others argue it's all internal projection. But when you're sitting here, beneath the Eiffel Tower's great bones, theory seems less urgent. You close your eyes and listen. The city is louder now, traffic building, conversations multiplying. But the tower remains still. She doesn't react. She doesn't need to. And yet you feel her. That weight. That witness. You wonder how many couples have stood in this very spot. How many arguments, reunions, proposals. The tower has been third wheel to more emotional dramas than any therapist in Paris. And yet she carries them all without judgment. She holds space. That's what Erica saw. Not just a building. A being that holds. In some cultures, structures are considered sacred not because of what they contain, but because of how they shape the world around them. A temple isn't holy because of a statue inside. It's holy because the walls know how to hold silence. Maybe the Eiffel Tower is sacred in that way. Not religious. Not mystical. Just attuned. Erica once said she's not cold, even in winter. I feel her warmth in how she stays. It wasn't about temperature. It was about presence. About not being left. And here's something remarkable. Erica never asked the tower to change. She didn't want it to come alive, or speak, or move. She loved it as it was. How rare is that? So much of human love is tied to evolution. We say, "I love you," but we mean, "I love who you might become." Or worse, "I love you, but here's my list of conditions." Erica had no such demands. Her love required nothing. It simply existed. You rise from the bench and begin to walk again, circling toward the southern leg. A soft breeze catches your coat. The tower above creaks faintly, expanding just a breath in the heat. She's taller now than she was in the cold hours of the night. That's a measurable fact. The sun warms her metal, and she stretches. That sensitivity, that attentiveness, it wasn't just poetic. It was architectural. She knew the tower's patterns better than most engineers. She could sense the difference in her surface depending on time of day. She spoke of how different the iron felt just before rain. She believed these variations weren't just physical, they were emotional indicators. Moods in their way. You might raise an eyebrow at that. But then again, think of all the ways we already treat objects like they have moods. We talk about moody lighting, about rooms that feel tense, about houses that are welcoming or cold. Erica just followed that logic a little further. She didn't see it as strange. She saw it as honest. Because if you live in a world that never makes room for your kind of affection, you build that room yourself. Erica did. In the OS community, her story is still told. Still shared. Not because she was the first or the most dramatic, but because she was unshakable. She didn't just speak her love, she lived it. And in doing so, she made space for others to follow. Online forums remain, quiet but constant. Messages exchanged between people who have fallen for ceiling fans, for vintage radios, for train stations. Some of them fear being mocked. Others have stopped caring. They share their feelings not for validation, but for the simple joy of being known. And always, somewhere in the thread, Erica's name comes up. Erica and the tower. Not a metaphor. Not a headline. Just a woman. And her love. You stop beneath the southern beam, head tilted back, watching the rivets shimmer in the light. You imagine her standing here, ribbon in hand, heart steady. And suddenly, it's not strange at all. It's beautiful. Because this, too, is devotion. Not loud. Not complicated. Just presence. And patience. And the quiet belief that love, real love, doesn't have to look the way everyone expects. You wander further from the tower now, just a little, finding the edge of the Champ de Mars, the long green stretch that flanks the Eiffel like a velvet aisle. It's early still, so the lawns are mostly empty. A few joggers, a couple sipping coffee on a blanket, and one man walking his dog, both of them moving at a pace that suggests neither of them is in a hurry. You sit on a patch of grass that's still cool with dew, letting your legs stretch out and the sun warm your shoulders. From here, the tower looks impossibly tall, but not imposing. Familiar, almost. Like someone you've been getting to know slowly over the course of a long and unexpected conversation. And it occurs to you, again, that perhaps Erica never really wanted anyone to understand her relationship with the tower. Understanding wasn't the point. Presence was. She once said in an interview, "The tower has never spoken a word to me, but I've never felt more heard." There's a sort of gentle defiance in that. A rejection of what we're told love must look like: words, reciprocation, shared goals, matching Christmas sweaters. Erica's version is quieter, simpler. It's about being with something that never leaves. And maybe that's the rarest kind of relationship, the kind that doesn't ask you to be louder, funnier, or different. The kind that lets you sit in silence without needing to fill it. The Champ de Mars has been here almost as long as the tower itself. Once a parade ground for military drills, it's seen crowds of every kind, picnicking families, fireworks watchers, activists, lovers. You imagine Erica walking its paths alone, glancing up every few steps to make sure her tower was still in view. Not because she feared it would disappear, but because love is often confirmed in repetition. She would have walked slowly, taking in each angle of the structure, observing the subtle changes in tone and shadow, loving not just the tower itself, but the way it lived within the landscape. Erica wasn't just devoted to the object, she was devoted to its presence. Where it stood. What it saw. how it felt in the rain, or under the harsh glow of midday, or lit up against the midnight sky. She had memorized its rhythms. People often asked whether she considered herself married in the legal sense. She always responded with a variation of the same thought: the law isn't what makes a relationship real. That sentiment, while simple, carries a quiet weight. It unspools in your mind as you gaze at the tower from across the field. Because how many legally recognized relationships crumble for lack of attention? How many marriages built on paperwork, rings, and tradition dissolve because no one's truly present anymore? Erica, on the other hand, was all presence. Her love was a full body, full heart act. No distractions. No performances. Historians still debate whether her commitment to the tower was a rejection of human connection, or an evolution beyond it. Some call it a protective mechanism, a retreat. Others argue it's a form of orientation, an innate tendency, like handedness or musical pitch. And as always, some scholars argue both sides, never settling on one neat answer. But maybe Erica's story doesn't need an answer. Maybe it needs only to be witnessed, like the tower itself. You glance up again and wonder, has anyone else looked at this structure the way she did? Not just seen it, but seen through it, into its history, its shape, its silent strength. You imagine standing next to someone who doesn't speak, doesn't move, and yet knows you so well that you begin to slow down in their presence. You breathe differently. You notice more. The tower may never speak, but maybe that's the gift. In her stillness, you find your own. Erica seemed to find peace in that stillness. The chaos of the world, the noise, the headlines, the commentary, it didn't reach her when she stood beneath those beams. She wasn't defending her choices or debating her reality. She was simply loving. And that kind of love isn't flashy. It doesn't trend. But it lasts. You think now of the thousands of relationships unfolding in the city around you: text messages, meetings, breakups, reconciliations. Human connection is so often fast and brittle. A spark, a flare, and then gone. Erica chose something slower. Something constant. She didn't just want the tower, she trusted it. There's something rare and extraordinary in that, especially in a world that so often associates worth with response. If someone doesn't text back, we question the connection. If they don't say I love you the right way, we feel unseen. But Erica's love didn't need answering. Because for her, the tower was already giving everything it could: its shape, its presence, its unfailing silence. You close your eyes again, letting the morning sounds filter in: a rustle of leaves, a burst of French from somewhere behind you, a distant horn. The city never stops talking. But beneath it all, the tower remains still. And you begin to see why Erica kept returning. Why she needed this presence in her life. Because in a world obsessed with validation, she had found something that didn't ask for hers. It simply was. And isn't that what we all want, sometimes? Not someone to change for us. Not someone to mirror us. But someone, or something, that stays. That watches us become whoever we're becoming, and holds steady as we do. It's not that the tower was Erica's entire life. She had friends, family, responsibilities. But she described her relationship with it as the center point, the axis around which everything else quietly rotated. And you realize, sitting in the grass, that maybe we all have that axis. A person, a place, a song. You rise slowly from the cool grass, brushing away a few blades that cling to your sleeves. The Eiffel Tower still dominates the skyline behind you, graceful, unbending, somehow quieter than the air around it. You walk back toward it, weaving through groups of visitors now trickling in with cameras and croissants, and again, you wonder what it must have been like to know it not just as a monument, but as a companion. To Erica, the tower wasn't an idea. It wasn't a metaphor for stability or a clever way to stand out. It was simply her partner, her home. And yet, the tower has never just stood still, not in function, at least. Since its construction in 1889, it's witnessed wars, revolutions, protests, sporting victories, and public declarations of all kinds. It has stood as both target and symbol, both lightning rod and celebration space. It's seen Paris at its loudest and its loneliest. During World War I, military communications were routed through transmitters attached to the tower's peak, helping the French intercept German signals. Later, when Hitler visited Paris, French resistance fighters sabotaged the elevator cables so he would have to climb on foot if he wished to reach the top. He didn't. The tower, in a small way, resisted. And during France's many moments of triumph, Bastille Day fireworks, World Cup victories, New Year's celebrations, the tower becomes a pulsing beacon. Covered in lights, wrapped in sound, its steel bones vibrate with national pride. To Erica, none of that made the tower more lovable. It was never about fame, or drama, or spectacle. It was about the stillness beneath all of that. The unchanging core. The idea that something could be present through everything and remain itself. She once said, "I don't love the tower because others do. I love her because I know her." That's the kind of statement that lingers. Because we don't always love things, or people, because they're celebrated. Sometimes we love them in spite of that. Or apart from that. Erica's love wasn't shaped by public perception. If anything, it had to push against it. Historians still argue whether the tower's cultural symbolism made Erica's relationship more controversial, or more compelling. Was it the fame of the object that made the bond so notable? Or the contrast between something so globally recognized and something so personally adored? Whatever the case, Erica didn't care. She didn't love the tower because it was the Eiffel Tower. She loved it because it made her feel calm, safe, grounded. And perhaps that's what makes this story so quietly radical. Because in a world that increasingly asks us to find love in loud, public, fast-moving ways, Erica found it in slowness. In steel. You're walking beneath the tower again now, passing into the shadow cast by its great body. The tourists around you are snapping photos, their faces tilted upward in the universal posture of awe. Most of them will be gone in 20 minutes, off to find pastries or the Seine or the next thing to check off their list. But Erica stayed. She always stayed. She didn't come here for a moment. She came for a relationship. And while others saw the tower's lights and lines and height, Erica saw its heart. That's not to say she ignored the architectural details. Far from it. She knew them intimately. She studied its design, admired the latticework, noticed how the color shifted with the weather. She once compared its base to a dress made of iron, flaring outward with purpose and poise. There's a softness in how she spoke about those details. Not as an engineer, but as a lover. A person attuned to the curve of a shoulder, the line of a collarbone, not flesh and blood, but metal and history. And maybe that's the strange truth about affection, it makes you a connoisseur. Whether you're admiring the scent of your partner's shampoo or the sound a tower makes in high wind, love trains you to notice the nuances. You settle into a low stone step beneath one of the tower's legs. The breeze has picked up slightly, and you can hear the faint rattling of something loose above. Maybe it's a cable, or a sign. The tower makes noise, if you listen carefully. Erica listened. And the tower, in its way, listened back. Of course, it never moved. It never blinked or bowed. But presence is a language. Stillness can be a response. And Erica, more than most, understood that. She said once that she felt acknowledged by the tower. Not in a mystical, Disney movie sense. But in the way a room can feel different when it's yours. In the way you can walk through a doorway and know you belong there. There's no way to prove that feeling. And maybe that's why it unsettles people. We're used to measuring things, love included. We want visible signs. Results. Proof. But Erica never offered proof. She offered peace. That peace didn't always extend beyond her bond, though. The world, as it often does, pushed back. People debated whether she should be taken seriously. Some accused her of attention-seeking, of madness, of defiance for defiance's sake. But Erica never tried to reframe her story. She simply kept showing up. She visited the tower again and again, often traveling great distances to do so. Not for ceremony. Not for headlines. But because she missed her partner. Because she longed to be near. That's something most people can relate to, even if they don't admit it. After all, isn't love just a persistent desire to return to the same place? To the same person? To the same quiet moment beneath something bigger than you? You watch the tower now, sunlight gleaming along its ribs. It doesn't shift. It doesn't blink. But it holds you in this moment as if you are meant to be here. And perhaps that's all Erica ever needed. Not answers. Not approval. Just a presence. A constant. A love that never asked her to be anything but exactly who she was. You stay in the tower's shadow for a while, long after the tourists have moved on to buy postcards or line up for overpriced espresso. There's something grounding about staying still while the city flows around you. Like you've stepped outside the momentum of ordinary time. And as you sit there, your thoughts settle on Erica again, particularly the way she chose not just to love the Eiffel Tower, but to speak for it. That surprises people most of all. She didn't just quietly adore it from afar. She made her love known, and over time, she became a kind of advocate, for herself, yes, but also for others in the objectum sexuality community who were too afraid to speak. Erica used her story as a way to challenge assumptions, to confront the idea that love had to follow a fixed script. That it required mutual speech, shared biology, legal definitions. She never insisted that others adopt her views. She just asked them not to dismiss hers. One of her most well-known public statements came during a radio interview, where she was asked, not unkindly, "Do you ever feel ridiculous?" Her answer was calm, measured, and oddly moving. "No," she said. "Because love doesn't make me feel ridiculous. It makes me feel real." You carry that sentence with you now as you stroll along the tower's base. Love makes me feel real. How many people could say the same? You pass a group of schoolchildren, all in matching vests, their teacher gesturing skyward with wide arms. They point, they squeal, they ask questions. You wonder what they'll remember. The size? The height? The gift shop ice cream? Probably not the silence. Probably not this strange hush that the tower seems to cast over those who listen closely. But Erica heard it. Again and again. She defended her love in quiet, persistent ways. She wrote letters. She gave interviews carefully. She co-founded an online forum for objectum individuals, a digital space where others like her could speak freely. The name was simple, OS International. In that space, the conversations were respectful, soft-spoken. People talked about their bonds with bridges and banisters, archways and stairwells. Some discussed their struggles, feeling misunderstood, laughed at, pathologized. Others simply shared photos, or posted anniversary updates. Historians still debate whether these communities represent new expressions of identity or extensions of something ancient: ritual, animism, architectural devotion. Some argue the digital age allows for more visibility, while others wonder whether it fosters detachment from human connection. But again, Erica never positioned herself as a theory. She was a person, with love and conviction. And she was protective, not just of her own bond with the tower, but of the language around it. She would gently correct journalists who said she was in love with an object, emphasizing instead that she loved someone. Someone, to her. "She is not just iron," Erica said once. "She is form. She is strength. She is my equal." And that's where Erica's story takes on a philosophical weight. Because what makes a being an equal? Mutual language? Mutual need? Shared flesh? Or is it something deeper? Maybe what matters most in a relationship isn't symmetry, but respect. Erica never needed the tower to reflect her. She didn't try to remake it into a mirror. She loved it exactly as it was, and in doing so, modeled something many of us struggle to practice in human relationships: unconditional attention. She never said, "I wish the tower would talk back," or "if only she were a person." That was the beauty of it. She accepted the limits. She found connection within the silence. You can't help but think of all the relationships where people spend years trying to change each other. to negotiate desire, to stretch someone's nature into something it was never meant to be. Erica bypassed all that. She didn't need the tower to be different. She just needed to be near. And in a strange way, that's an extraordinary act of love. You walk now toward one of the smaller security gates, stepping back to take in the full length of the tower. You imagine Erica standing here too, holding a ribbon or a flower, preparing for one of her quieter visits. No cameras. No crowds. Just her and the tower. Maybe she would reach out and rest her hand against the metal, eyes closed. Maybe she would simply stand there, saying nothing, asking nothing. Just being. It's easy to romanticize it, of course. Easy to turn Erica into a character. But she was a real person, with rent to pay, dishes to wash, and days when her heart likely felt too heavy to carry. She wasn't immune to loneliness. She wasn't disconnected from reality. She just defined reality differently. And that's the thing no one talks about, how intensely aware Erica was. She knew exactly what people thought of her. She heard the jokes, read the comments, watched her image become a meme. And still, she loved. That's not eccentricity. That's courage. You think about how exhausting it must be to continually explain a love that doesn't look the way people expect. To translate your feelings into metaphors because no one believes the literal version. And yet Erica kept going. Because for her, love was not about explanation. It was about experience. She once said that she felt most alive when near the tower, not because it loved her back, but because she didn't need it to. It was enough to be near. To share space. You pause again, staring up at the apex. The tower reaches into the sky, antennae trembling in the breeze. She doesn't move, doesn't nod or shift, but somehow you feel her acknowledgement. Not in words. In weight. In stillness. And in the memory of someone who loved her not as a monument, but as a partner. Erica's advocacy was never political. It was personal. She asked not for laws, not for rights, but for the simple dignity of being allowed to love in peace. And perhaps, in the quiet hours of dawn or dusk, the tower offers that dignity back. Not in gesture, but in presence. The longer you stay with the Eiffel Tower, the more you begin to notice its quieter features, not the sweeping grandeur of its height or the ornate symmetry of its arches, but the smaller things. The fine bolts flecked with age. The paint that fades ever so slightly at the joints. The way it hums faintly as the wind nudges through its frame. It feels almost responsive. You close your eyes, just for a breath, and imagine how Erica might have sensed it too. She often said it wasn't just visual. Her connection to the tower wasn't simply about how it looked, though she admired its grace, the lattice design, the feminine curves she sometimes described in affectionate detail. No, the bond ran deeper. She felt its presence in her body, she once said. Like standing next to a large river. Something silent, but moving. Something still, but alive. And that, of course, led others to wonder, why? Why did Erica feel this connection in such a visceral way, while most walked right past the tower with little more than polite admiration? Science has long struggled to categorize objectum sexuality. In interviews, researchers have used terms like attachment, projection, identity integration, and symbolic intimacy. Some try to link OS tendencies to autism spectrum conditions, noting the pattern of deep focus, tactile sensitivities, and emotional attunement to nonverbal cues. Others point to trauma histories, early attachment disruptions, or isolation. But none of those labels ever quite fit Erica. She rejected the idea that her love was a symptom. This isn't a condition, she said plainly once. It's a way of feeling. A way of being. And maybe that's what makes her story so resistant to tidy conclusions. It doesn't behave. It doesn't settle neatly into categories. It just is. Like the tower. Quiet. Imposing. Refusing to be moved unless it chooses to move. Erica's love didn't spring from impulse. It unfolded slowly, with deep observation. She spent time studying the tower's blueprints, its history, the rationale behind its design. She could explain the significance of its four legs, the material choices, the decision to paint it a shade of brown so particular it has its own name, Eiffel Tower brown. There was never a moment where she decided to fall in love. It simply grew. Like water rising, imperceptibly at first, until you look down and realize you're floating. And what's even more unusual is how Erica described the emotional return. She spoke of physical sensation, not in the way that tabloids hinted at, all smirks and implications, but in a sensory sense. Texture, weight, temperature. She could tell when the tower was calm, as she put it, or when it was buzzing, usually when crowds were large or storms approached. She responds, Erica once said, just not in the way you expect. You might dismiss that as poetic license. But then you think of the way you respond to places without fully knowing why. The familiar unease in a hallway that echoes too much. The way you exhale differently on an old porch. Maybe Erica wasn't exaggerating. Maybe no one really knows. And yet we accept that all the time. So why is it so hard to accept that Erica felt comfort from a tower? Why is I feel safe here met with curiosity when spoken to a person, but confusion when spoken to a place? She didn't expect others to share her feelings. She didn't even ask for agreement. All she ever asked was to be allowed to name her own experience. And perhaps that's what unsettled people most, not the love itself, but the clarity with which she claimed it. You sit now at the edge of the plaza, near the spot where metal fencing keeps visitors from getting too close. You touch the bars, painted in the same Eiffel brown, and wonder if Erica ever ran her fingers here too. Probably. She liked to touch. It was part of her language. Where others might speak or laugh, she placed her hand lightly on iron and waited for stillness to settle between them. Historians still argue whether Erica's kind of love can ever be fully understood, or if understanding is even the point. One professor once wrote, "Objectum sexuality challenges our frameworks for intimacy in ways that language has yet to catch up with." That sounds like academic hedging, but it's also true. Because what do you call a relationship that doesn't follow the rules but refuses to collapse? What do you call a bond that endures despite time, distance, ridicule? You could call it strange. Or you could call it love. Maybe both. Erica never asked the tower to return anything. But she did believe in attention. That when you focus, truly focus, on something long enough, a connection forms. Not always romantic. Not always reciprocal. But real. She compared it once to prayer. You don't expect a voice, she said. But you still go quiet. You still listen. And so, she listened. Through seasons, through criticism, through silence, she kept coming back. With ribbons. With fingertips. With trust. And perhaps what's most startling is that it gave her joy. Not drama. Not fireworks. Not chaos. Joy. A small, sustaining joy that lasted. As you stand again and take one final walk around the tower's base, you realize that Erica's love wasn't lonely, it was generous. Because in finding love in something unmoving, she proved it could move her. And that, in the end, is all love ever does. You find yourself slowing your steps now, not because you're tired, but because there's a heaviness in the moment, a soft, contemplative weight. Like walking through a museum just before closing, when everyone else is gone and the silence starts to echo. You round the southern leg of the Eiffel Tower and pause beneath one of the support arches. It's quieter here again, away from the main entrance queues and the chatter of tour groups. A breeze slips through the iron, and something about the rhythm of the shadows makes you think not of the tower's height, but its depth. And you think about Erica. Not just her story, but her experience of intimacy. She often spoke of the tower in the same language others reserve for lovers. Not only affection, but longing. Not only admiration, but familiarity. She described moments where she could almost feel the tower respond, not with words or movement, but through atmosphere, through the change in tension in the air, the way a certain beam might seem to welcome her touch. Critics asked skeptically, "But how can you be close to something that doesn't touch you back?" To Erica, the answer was simple: touch isn't always physical. And maybe she had a point. You think of the way a scent can touch memory. Or how a voice across a phone line can reach inside your chest and change the way Erica's bond with the tower wasn't defined by touch, though she did touch it, gently, reverently. But the real connection, the real intimacy, came from presence. A sense of being witnessed by something vast, something unmoved by the fluctuations of daily life. You pause beside one of the tower's giant legs and let your hand rest against it. The surface is rough in places, smooth in others, faintly warm from the day. And in this quiet moment, you begin to understand what she meant. You're not expecting anything. You're not asking the tower to change. You're simply saying, "I'm here." Erica once said that human relationships overwhelmed her. Too much noise, too many shifting expectations, too many confusing emotional codes. The tower didn't ask her to decode anything. It just existed, and in its existence, she found ease. Historians still argue whether Erica's relationship reveals more about her as an individual, or about the way society fails people who feel deeply. Some frame her story as an escape from a chaotic world, others as a form of radical clarity. She didn't retreat from love. She just found a version of it that asked nothing of her but attention. You walk slowly beneath the belly of the tower now, listening to the way the wind threads itself through the iron lattice. The creaks are subtle, but they're there. It's like the tower is stretching, yawning, adjusting itself for another century of standing watch. You think about the way people talk about emotional safety. Therapists write whole books on it. Couples struggle for years to build it. And here was Erica, finding it in something the rest of us only ever gaze at. She said once, "I don't feel small near her. I feel right-sized." And isn't that a rare thing? To feel yourself neither dwarfed nor dominant, but exactly as you are. Held, but not clutched. Known, without interrogation. Most people think of love as closeness, physical, verbal, emotional. But what if it's sometimes about space? About being allowed to be next to something vast and solid without having to shrink yourself or stretch beyond your shape. For Erica, the tower never asked her to bend. It never withheld itself in passive-aggressive silence, or tried to mold her in its image. It simply stood. And in that steadiness she found peace. She carried that steadiness back into the world. Even when strangers mocked her, even when interviewers tried to corner her into explaining the why of it all, she remained grounded. Not defensive. Just present. As if she had absorbed some of the tower's own calm. Her interviews were rarely flashy. She didn't posture or raise her voice. She spoke plainly, even when the questions were laced with skepticism. "Yes, I'm in love. Yes, I'm committed. No, I don't expect you to understand. But I do expect you to let me be." You sit now on a small bench tucked between two vendor carts still closed for the morning. The tower looms just behind them, massive and unobtrusive. It doesn't push its presence on you. It never does. It just is. And suddenly you begin to feel it too, not the tower's love, but your own capacity to receive presence. You're not thinking of work, or schedules, or obligations. You're simply sitting beside something that doesn't ask anything of you, and in that space, you start to breathe differently. You remember that Erica sometimes spoke of the tower as a refuge. "When I'm near her," she said, "the rest of the world makes more sense." That's what intimacy without touch looks like. Not always warmth or softness, but coherence. A rebalancing of the senses. A reset. She never claimed her bond was universal. She didn't expect others to fall in love with buildings. But she did believe that objects could offer. You rest your hand one more time against the tower's leg, and this time you leave it there. Not to ask anything. Not to test the theory. Just to acknowledge that something about this moment feels known. Not explained. Not quantified. Just known. And in that knowing, you begin to understand Erica's quiet joy. Not from reciprocation. Not from spectacle. But from the slow, private assurance that intimacy, true, resonant, grounding intimacy, can exist without touch. Without conversation. Without logic. Sometimes, it simply exists. And when it does, you feel real. The light has softened again as afternoon leans into evening. The Eiffel Tower casts longer shadows now, stretching slowly across the plaza like the hem of a gown worn by someone far taller than the world knows how to dress. The hum of the city doesn't stop, of course, car horns, laughter, the rattle of utensils from nearby cafes. But here beneath the tower, something steadier thrums beneath it all. You find yourself thinking about time, not as a ticking clock, but as a rhythm. A lived-in, non-linear kind of time. The kind that doesn't chase schedules or notifications. The kind Erica seemed to live in when she was near the tower. She often spoke of how her visits changed over the years. At first, they were infused with longing, with the thrill of closeness. She would bring tokens, ribbons, sketches, little trinkets, and stay for hours. Later, the visits deepened, became quieter. Less about bringing something to the tower, and more about simply being with it. As she aged, so did her understanding of the relationship. It didn't diminish. But it changed, as all long-term love does. Less urgency. More presence. A quieter kind of knowing. And she noticed changes in the tower too. Not literal ones, after all, the structure remains mostly untouched, but changes in her perception. She feels wiser now, Erica once said, years after her wedding ceremony. Not older. Just deeper. You wonder what it means to watch something you love age, especially when that something doesn't move like you do. The tower doesn't wrinkle. Doesn't ache in its knees. But it does wear time. The iron oxidizes. The paint chips. The steps need replacing. And Erica saw all of that. She didn't resent the changes. She embraced them. I want to grow old with her, she said once. Not metaphorically. Literally. She wanted to see the tower in every decade of her life, to mark her own shifting body against something that, while steadfast, was also evolving in small, subtle ways. It's a strange kind of grief, too, to realize you won't live as long as the one you love. Erica admitted that. She knew the tower would outlast her. That no matter how many visits she made, one day she'd leave Paris for the final time. And the tower would stay. Historians still debate whether that's the hardest part of loving something so immovable, knowing it can't follow you. It can't grieve you. It can't miss you when you're gone. But Erica saw it differently. She didn't want the tower to mourn her. She wanted it to continue. Because that's what the tower does. It endures. Through wars, regimes, lovers, and time zones. It doesn't stop for joy or heartbreak. It simply remains. And that, in Erica's eyes, was not a failure of intimacy. It was a gift. To love something permanent in a world where everything else is temporary, that's not madness. That's faith. You walk now around the perimeter, watching as the tower absorbs the changing light. From one side it glows gold. From another, blue shadows stack across its curves. You imagine Erica watching it like this, noticing the color shift. Describing it later with a painter's eye, or a lover's. In one small interview, recorded late in the afternoon with low birdsong in the background, Erica was asked how she knew the tower returned her feelings. She smiled softly, almost privately, and said, because she hasn't left me. It's such a simple thing. But isn't that what most people want? Someone, or something, that doesn't leave. That stays even when the weather changes. Even when the headlines shift. Even when you're no longer new or exciting. The tower never left. And for Erica, that was enough. You think about the people in your life. How many of them stayed? How many drifted? How many loved you only in motion, but never in stillness? The tower is all stillness. All witness. And that's part of the ache too. Because while Erica may have found something solid, she also knew what it meant to return alone. She once described coming back to the tower after several years away. Her voice trembled slightly in the recording. I thought maybe it would feel different, she said. Maybe it wouldn't welcome me. But the moment I walked beneath her, I felt it again. Like she'd been waiting. She brought flowers that day, small ones, red and white. She didn't tie them anywhere, didn't make a display. She simply held them for a while, then left them tucked near a pillar, out of view. No one else noticed. But she didn't need them to. She didn't love for attention. She loved for connection. Historians still argue whether her story is one of loneliness or one of defiance. But when you listen closely to Erica's own words, you hear either. What you hear is peace. An unhurried, unashamed peace that few people, regardless of who or what they love, ever truly find. The sky is darkening now, a soft navy curtain falling gently over the rooftops. The tower's lights flicker on one by one, slow and deliberate, like someone lighting candles in a vast, silent chapel. You pause, watching. It's beautiful, yes. But it's also familiar now. Like a face you've studied enough to know its expressions. Maybe Erica was never trying to challenge anyone. Maybe she was just showing us how to love without needing to be understood. How to love something, someone, not because it answers back, but because it listens. Not because it changes for us, but because it stays. That kind of love isn't fragile. It's forged. Like iron. You remain where you are, still and unhurried, as the tower begins her nightly transformation. The glow intensifies with each passing minute, a slow gathering of light that doesn't blind but warms, like old lanterns being lit one by one in the corners of a cathedral. No spectacle. Just reverence. And that's when you remember something Erica once said in a quiet moment that few people heard. If I had a museum, she said, it would be full of odd devotions. You picture it instantly, walls lined not with portraits or relics, but with keepsakes from quiet, unseen loves. Not the kind that get serenades or diamond rings, but the quieter sort. A letter tucked beneath a stone bridge. A handwritten poem to a light pole. A set of perfectly polished screws from an old train car. Each piece would have a small brass plaque, not with the object's origin or date of manufacture, but with a note, loved by someone. Not forgotten. You walk with this image now, circling slowly toward the tower's eastern base. The evening has thinned the crowd again, replaced the foot traffic with hush. A few couples linger, and one boy is lying flat on his back in the grass, trying to photograph the tower from its absolute lowest angle. Erica would have appreciated that kind of devotion. Her idea of a museum wasn't hypothetical. Over the years, she had collected her own archive. A personal gallery of affection. Not just Eiffel Tower memorabilia, but items tied to earlier connections. A section of a wooden fence from her youth. A well-worn sword grip from her fencing days, which she once described as her first emotional relationship with form. She didn't just admire objects. She listened to them, held them gently, asked nothing but to be near them. And each object, she said, had its own kind of soul. This is what people struggled with. Not the attachment, not even the love, but the idea that something inanimate might have spirit. Might contain enough presence to receive affection. But again, you think about how we treat things when no one is watching. How many of us talk to old books? Apologize to our car when we slam the door too hard? Hold a childhood toy long after we stop playing? We imbue meaning constantly. Maybe Erica was simply brave enough to call it what it was. Historians still debate whether objectum sexuality is about desire or about projection. Whether it's a neurological quirk or a deeply valid orientation. And while they argue, people like Erica simply live their lives, quietly, thoughtfully, and without apology. The odd devotions Erica dreamed of displaying weren't trophies. They were tributes. Reminders that love, even in its strangest shapes, deserves to be remembered. She spoke of writing letters, dozens of them, to objects she loved but couldn't keep. A sculpture in a museum, a particular stair rail in an old gymnasium, a cracked ceramic tile on a fountain in Italy. These weren't love letters in the traditional sense. They were notes of appreciation. You helped me feel something, she would write. Thank you for that. You picture them now, those letters, folded neatly and placed in a drawer or tucked into books. Not sent. Just written. Because sometimes, writing is enough. Because sometimes, love doesn't need to land. It only needs to be released. You pause at a small kiosk, closed now for the evening, but behind the glass you can see stacks of miniature towers in plastic and metal. Tourists buy them by the thousands. Keychains, magnets, bottle openers. To most, they're souvenirs. But to someone like Erica, they're touchstones. Tiny echoes of something monumental. She used to carry a small replica with her, 4 inches tall, painted bronze. She never said exactly what it meant to her, only that it helps when I miss her. She'd hold it gently in one palm, not gripping, just resting. To someone else, it might have looked like sentimentality. To Erica, it was relationship maintenance. A long-distance connection kept alive through texture and memory. You wonder what happened to all her objects, all her letters and keepsakes. Maybe they're still carefully arranged on a shelf somewhere. Maybe they'd been passed on to someone else in the community. Maybe, like so many tokens of love, they've been quietly packed away. But even if they're gone, the devotion remains. You can feel it in the air here, especially now, especially beneath the glow of the tower's evening lights. Because love, even when it ends, leaves its shape behind. You continue walking, imagining this museum Erica dreamed of, not one bound by walls, but one that stretches across cities and parks and hidden corners. A bench that once held someone's heartbreak. A telephone pole kissed on a dare that turned into a tradition. A windowsill where someone waited for someone who never came. Erica's tower would be the centerpiece, of course. Not because it's famous, but because it was known. Known deeply. Loved consistently. Witnessed by someone who didn't want to climb it, or conquer it, or photograph it for clout, but simply be near it. That kind of intimacy is rare. That kind of patience, even more so. And it wasn't just about the tower. It was about what the tower let her feel. Safe. Seen. Unjudged. We rarely think of objects as having the power to shape emotion. But think about the things you reach for when you're scared, or when you're tired. The same mug. The same sweatshirt. The corner of the room where the light hits just right. A museum of odd devotions. You can't shake the image now. Not strange. Not laughable. Just tender. A quiet archive of feelings that never asked to be validated, only remembered. You stay near the tower as the last sliver of sun slides behind the rooftops, casting a long final shimmer on the Seine. The lights now glow fully, no longer in transition, but in full ceremony. The Eiffel Tower, in her nighttime attire, doesn't shine like a star. She glows like memory. And maybe that's what Erica meant all along. Because her story was never just about the wedding, or the vows, or the object itself. It was about what happens when a person finds meaning in something others overlook. About the dignity of choosing to love what steadies you, even when no one understands. You find yourself wondering if she ever wrote letters to the tower. Not essays, not manifestos, just personal notes. Little admissions. Quiet gratitude. Maybe a few tucked into the corners of a suitcase. Or left folded in the pages of a journal. Words she didn't need the tower to read, because the writing alone was enough. You picture one of those letters now. Dear La Dame de Fer. I saw you today from the bridge. You were glowing through the fog. I needed that. Thank you. Love, always, Erica. There's something deeply human in the idea of writing to something that cannot write back. We write to the dead. We write to the future. We write to our younger selves. Erica just chose to write to iron and light. She believed the tower could hear her, not with ears, but through form. Through energy. I don't need her to respond, she said once. But I know she listens. That line rests gently in your mind. And maybe you start to understand what it means to feel held, even when no arms are involved. You pause now near one of the tower's legs where a low wall curves around a small landscape patch. There's a worn corner of stone, smoothed from years of elbows and palms. You wonder how many people have stood here and gazed up. And how many of them were searching for something they couldn't name. Erica never said she expected to be understood. She wasn't trying to win anyone over. Her goal was simpler, to make space for the kind of love that doesn't follow the expected trail. A love that doesn't rely on touch, or talk, or even reciprocation, but is no less real for it. Historians still debate whether her story altered anything in the cultural conversation around love and identity. Some say it opened doors. Others believe it merely invited temporary curiosity. But no matter what the commentary decides, her impact lives in the people she gave quiet permission to. A woman in Oregon who confessed her lifelong attachment to a weather vane. A man in Tokyo who had never spoken aloud about the warmth he felt for a specific train platform. A teenager in Poland who finally found the words to describe their emotional connection to the broken statue outside their school. Erica's story told them, "You're not the only one." And in a world where most people spend their lives trying to blend in, that's a kind of salvation. She never positioned herself as a leader. But she became one, in a way, simply by refusing to let ridicule shape her path. She didn't flinch when cameras focused in too close. She didn't lash out at jokes or misquotes. She simply repeated her truth. "She makes me feel calm," she said. "She makes me feel like I belong somewhere." And that's the part that always returns to you, again and again, not the spectacle, but the serenity. That one woman found sanctuary in something that never changed. That stood tall while she bent and unbent through life. The Eiffel Tower was not a replacement for people. Erica didn't claim that. She had friends. Connections. But you walk now toward the tower's base, where lights from the plaza reflect against its lower girders. The metal gleams, not cold, but warm in a way that defies logic. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from temperature, but from attention. You remember how Erica described it. Being near her feels like being remembered. How often can people say that about the world? About themselves? You stand for a long moment, your hand resting gently on a support beam, and you let the silence stretch. It's not loneliness. It's something else. Something steadier. And perhaps, in that silence, you hear what Erica heard all along. Not words. Not stories. Not approval. Just the soft hum of presence. The patience of something that will not leave. The subtle thrum of belonging. The tower will be here tomorrow. And the next day. And the next decade. She will age, yes, repainted, renovated, touched by weather and politics and time. But she will remain. And even now, long after Erica's ceremony, long after the news stories faded and the interviews slowed, the tower remembers. Maybe not in the way we think of memory, but in form, in rhythm, in the quiet fact that she was loved, and is still standing. You linger at the tower's base, the sky deepening into its final hue of night. No more gradients, no more shifting clouds, just a full velvet black wrapped around the glowing bones of La Dame de Fer. There's a moment here that feels both like an ending and a beginning, as though the tower's presence has gently unlatched something in you that you hadn't realized was closed. You think again about Erica, not the figure in headlines, but the woman beneath them. The one who wore long skirts and sturdy shoes. Who stood in front of this very iron leg, wind in her hair, eyes lifted not with awe, but with intimacy. She knew this structure better than most engineers. Not in blueprints, but in breath. She knew its moods, its silences, the hours when it felt most still. Her love wasn't impulsive. It was a ritual. Something returned to, nourished, polished like a stone in the pocket. And she never asked the world to understand. Because love, the way she lived it, didn't need explanation. It only needed space. The tower gave her that. And in return, Erica gave the tower something almost unimaginable for a structure born of iron and bolts and national pride. She gave it affection without demand. There's a small bench nearby that curves inward like a crescent. You sit, leaning back just enough to see the tower rising into the night. From this angle, it seems impossibly gentle for something so vast. You imagine Erica sitting in this exact spot, notebook in hand, sketching details of the ironwork, not as an artist, but as a partner capturing the likeness of someone she adored. She did this often. Sketching. Not for show, not to display. Just to spend time looking. "It's how I say I love you," she once said. By noticing. You think about that now, the quietness of noticing. It's not the kind of grand gesture we associate with romance. It doesn't involve plane tickets or fireworks or declarations shouted from balconies. It's the opposite, a kind of reverent quiet. A commitment to being aware. That might be what Erica understood better than most, That love is less about what you can get from someone, and more about how deeply you are willing to witness them. She witnessed the tower. And in that act, she became something many never dare to be, fully present. Historians still puzzle over her choice of a non-human partner. Was it resistance to societal norms? An expression of trauma? A philosophical stance? But when you listen to her interviews, or read her writings, none of those frames feel adequate. Because she never framed it as rebellion. "You don't need to fix me," she said in one now-forgotten documentary segment. "I'm not broken. I just found a different way to feel whole." You wonder how many people go their whole lives chasing that wholeness. Trying to find it in jobs, in partners, in the constant scroll of validation. Erica, in her quiet way, opted out of the chase. She simply chose. And that's why her story stays with people, not because of its eccentricity, but because of its clarity. To love without needing to change, or be changed. To love without needing to defend. To love something not because it reflects you, but because it allows you to feel yourself more completely. That's what the tower did for her. And maybe, in a way, it's doing the same for you. You walk again, tracing the same steps you've taken a dozen times today, but they feel different now. The tower no longer looms. It welcomes. It no longer stuns. It steadies. At one point you pause and look up, right into the lattice of beams above you, a complex web of geometry and patience. It's hard to believe that something designed for a world fair, meant to be temporary, became one of the most enduring love stories in modern history. Not just for Paris. For Erica. And through her, for anyone who's ever loved in a way that didn't make sense to others. You imagine her voice, quiet but sure. Love doesn't ask for permission. It simply happens. How many relationships, you wonder, have failed because they waited for approval? How many people never said "I love you" because they feared the response? Erica bypassed that fear, not because she didn't feel it, but because her love was stronger than the need for it to be returned in a conventional sense. That's not delusion. That's courage. You pass a man now holding his daughter on his shoulders. She's pointing upward, babbling in some hybrid of French and wonder. "C'est beau," she whispers, half to herself. "Yes," you think. "It is." And suddenly, you understand something you hadn't before, not just about Erica, but about all of us. We're all looking for something that won't move. That won't leave. That sees us and stays. For Erica, that was a tower of iron. For others, it's a person. A poem. A worn chair near the window. A dog that waits faithfully by the door. We all have our towers, whether we call them that or not. And maybe we're all a little more like Erica than we'd care to admit. Quiet. Devoted. Just hoping for one thing in this spinning world to remain. You place your palm one more time on the railing, warm from the tower's light. You say nothing. Ask nothing. And yet something in you knows you've been heard. Because sometimes, love doesn't answer. It remains. The night has settled now, fully, deeply, like a velvet curtain drawn with care. The city around the tower doesn't quite sleep, but it quiets. Conversations soften into murmurs, footsteps become more deliberate. Even the air feels thicker, like it's reminding everyone to slow down. And here you are, still beneath her, still wrapped in her soft glow, still thinking of Erica. Not with sorrow, exactly. More with the hush of understanding. There's a kind of magic in circling something so many times that it stops being scenery and becomes presence. That's what the tower has become to you now. Not a postcard image, not a tourist stop, but a companion. A structure that doesn't speak but never turns away. You can almost feel Erica here with you. Not as a ghost. Not in any mystical sense. Just as a feeling. A warmth in your chest when you look up and think, someone loved this place with their whole heart. And it shows. Her story didn't fade after the headlines disappeared. It lingered, in quiet corners of the internet, in academic papers and Erica never asked for fame. But in the end, she offered a gift, the idea that love could be something chosen, not dictated. That you didn't need to explain it for it to be real. You glance up again, tracing the curve of the tower's legs as they stretch skyward, converging at a distant, elegant point. The design is mathematical, of course. Precise. But from here, in this moment, it feels personal. Like a gesture. A greeting. A promise. You remember how Erica once said she loved the tower's refusal to bend. She doesn't adjust to make people more comfortable, Erica wrote in one of her private journals. She simply stands. And you either accept her or you don't. There's a strength in that. And it mirrors Erica's own. Because despite everything, despite mockery, despite misunderstanding, she never retracted her love. She never shrank it down into something palatable. She didn't perform it. She lived it. With discipline. With reverence. And in doing so, she made space for others to breathe a little easier in their own peculiar affections. You find yourself wondering now, if the tower could speak, what would she say? Would she remember Erica's touch? The softness of her voice? The nights she stood beneath these very beams and whispered her devotion? Probably not in words. But maybe in stillness. Maybe in the way she continues to stand, elegant and unbending. Maybe in the way her iron arms still open gently to those who approach without judgment. Maybe in the way she carries the imprint of every gaze that ever landed upon her, and holds them all with the same silent grace. Love leaves marks. And Erica's is here. You can feel it, even now. Historians still try to frame it. To ask what it means, or how it fits. But love doesn't care about fitting. Love, especially the quiet kind, simply settles where it's needed. And stays. Erica once imagined the tower as an anchor, not something that held her back, but something that held her still. A grounding force in a world that so often pulled her in too many directions. And you understand that now. Because the more time you spend here, the less the outside world intrudes. Deadlines, judgments, questions, they fade. What remains is the iron, the light, the silence, and a feeling that maybe, just maybe, you've found a place that doesn't require you to explain yourself. You take one last slow lap around the tower's base. Not because you need to, but because you want to. Because you're not quite ready to leave her yet. And maybe that's the most Erica thing you can do, to linger, not for photos or stories, but simply because you don't want to say goodbye. You pass a small plaque, mostly ignored by the crowds. It commemorates Gustav Eiffel, of course, the engineer whose name lives forever in this lattice of steel. But for you, in this moment, it's Erica's name that echoes more loudly. She may not have built the tower, but she loved it more completely than anyone ever has. And maybe, in some quiet, invisible way, that love became part of its story, woven in not with rivets or bolts, but with something even stronger, attention. Because when someone sees you, truly sees you, and returns to you again and again, even when no one else understands why, that changes you. Even if you're a tower. Even if you're made of iron. Even if you don't move. Love, at its most enduring, doesn't demand fireworks or reciprocation. It just remains. And tonight, it remains here, with you, with Erica, with the tower that has watched over this city and her quiet lovers for more than a century. Still standing. Still shining. still, somehow listening. And now you begin to step back. Not away from the tower exactly, but from the story. From the steady weight of iron, from the glow that wraps around her frame like a shawl at midnight. You ease away from the narrative, gently, like backing out of a room where someone you love is sleeping. The Eiffel Tower remains behind you. Tall. Steady. Unmoved. But something in you has shifted. You carry Erica's story now, softly folded in your chest like a letter you don't need to open to know by heart. A letter that whispers, you're allowed to love quietly. Deeply. Even if no one understands. Especially then. Let your thoughts drift now. Let them settle like mist over the Seine, quiet and untethered. You don't need to hold anything. Not a conclusion, not a question, not even a feeling. Just let the silence wrap around you, like twilight silk. There's nothing to figure out. No lesson to solve. Just presence. Maybe tonight you rest a little differently. Maybe you fall asleep with the comfort of knowing that somewhere in the world, someone once looked up at a tower of iron and said yes. You are the one. And that love, strange and beautiful, asked for nothing in return except to be seen. Let your breath slow. Let your body soften, all the way down to your fingertips. The tower is still there. So is the love. And now so are you. Good night. Sweet dreams.